Bubba is one of the 2 chainsaw killers in Dead by Daylight. He's not as fast compared to his counterpart the Hillbilly, but he more than makes up for it with the ability to insta-down several survivors at a time and memes. It's been 6 years since he joined the roster, and normally with such old killers you expect their changelog to be the size of the Old and New Testament combined. However, Bubba is a different story, cause he needed only 3 patches to go from meh to one of the most intimidating killers in the game. The biggest problem Bubba had at the release was the way his chainsaw sweep mechanic used to work. Just like today, it gave him a little extra zoom, making him move slightly faster than his normal walking speed. Namely, in the case with the old Bubba, the sweeping speed was 5 and 6 thousandths meters per second, which isn't too shabby, but it's still slower than in the current patch. And I could start whining about how it was stupid and unfair and that it made downing survivors with the chainsaw harder than it should be, but the thing is that the speed difference we're talking about here is only 0.23 meters per second, which honestly, if it wasn't for the patch notes, I'm not even sure if I would even notice it. Yeah, I'm gonna try it somewhere here, I think. And go. Oh well, I mean, it's kind of hard to say if there's any difference. But if there's any difference, then yeah, it's not very drastic. I don't know. I can't really say. And that's awesome. I mean, finally a killer who wasn't complete trash at the release. But here's the rub. Bubba's original power wasn't charge-based, which means that he couldn't increase its duration by consuming extra swing tokens and chainsaw sweep after survivors through half of the map, like people often do in the live version. Instead, as the old Bubba, you were limited to only 5 chainsaw swings, which were barely enough to go from one side of the killer shack to another. And no, you couldn't increase this distance even with the best add-ons. Move forward. A little more. Yeah, like this. I'm gonna stand in the grass and charge. And now go. 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, basically you ran out of charges right as you left the shack. Well, you maybe ran for like half a meter. Combined with the lower movement speed while using your power, which I mentioned before, it meant that if you wanted to down a survivor with your chainsaw, you had to start revving it only when you were pretty much already breathing down their neck. Unless, of course, you wanted to simply slice the air 5 times and go on cooldown, letting them run to a safe spot for free. I say let's try 3 tiles. 1, 2, 3. 3, yeah. And run. This time the timing was perfect. And no, bro, are you kidding me? Bro, 3 tiles. That's like barely any distance, I swear. The lack of speed and distance of the old chainsaw sweep felt especially bad in loops. These days, Bubba's power allows you to run around most of the tiles in the game even without using any add-ons. And after this, you sometimes still have plenty of juice left. That's why instead of being straightforward with their chainsaw, a lot of Bubba players like to double back and make survivors run into their chainsaw, because they know they have the time for this. Yes, it doesn't always work because some loops are super open and don't really allow any mind games, but even in this case, you're not completely helpless. Because if, let's say, you've spent 1 charge trying to outfake a survivor but you failed, you can always just say f it and commit to one direction with the rest of your charges in order to at least try and make them drop the pallet. Which in many cases they actually have to do, because unless they're godlike at tracking Bubba's ability and they know exactly what kind of add-ons you're running, they might simply not make this one extra loop before you catch up with them. Gonna start revving it right here. Can I get you? I think I can! Bro, I can! Bro! And look how much of my power I still got left! I still made it to the freaking pallet! The old Bubba, however, couldn't afford something like this, because in order to pull off a somewhat believable double back, you would have to spend at least 1 chainsaw swing. And at that point, having only 4 more swings left, you could pretty much forget about trying to reach the survivor in time. Your chainsaw would simply stall halfway through. Now let's try and do it like this. Alright, that was a little bit rough, but nah, yeah, that was rough. Okay. I don't want to give up. Alright, that was better. Reach! No, are you kidding me, bro? I'm like running the acceleration add-on, the speed movement add-on, and also Dinker, and like, There's still nothing I can do. The strangest part about the old Bubba's base kit was that when you successfully downed a survivor with your chainsaw, it gave you a 3 seconds long cooldown. And I'm not saying 3 seconds as in, oh my god, that's so long. Not really, because that's only like 1 second longer than in the live version. But at the release, it was also 1 second longer than the cooldown after a missed chainsaw attack. In other words, as the old Bubba, the game punished you for being good with your ability more than it punished you for being bad. Old DBD logic, I guess. Judging by how I've been shitting on the old Bubba for the past several minutes, you could have gotten the impression that he actually didn't have a single strong side. But this is not quite true, because some aspects of his ability were objectively stronger before the rework. Like for example, the tantrum mechanic. Back in the day, Bubba didn't have the tantrum meter, so you could literally rev your chainsaw for as long as you wanted, and not worry that at some point your character is gonna randomly stop in the middle of a chase and start doing a warm-up exercise like it's an 80s fitness show. Come on already, bro. Come on, Volt. I can do it all day, I swear. I'm not gonna go on cooldown. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh my god, did you see that? How did I not get you? Basically, the only way you could get into a tantrum before patch 4.1.0 was by bumping into an obstacle during the chainsaw sweep. But even here, the old Bubba had the upper hand, because once again, at that time, his ability didn't have charges, and as a matter of fact, you physically couldn't get punished by an increased tantrum duration for using them. Alright, let me just reset the timer. Let's get it over here, and start revving. And go. Alright, perfect. 3, 4, 5. Well, 6.5 seconds, that's like the longest tantrum. Originally, the Leatherface chapter was gonna be a full chapter DLC. However, during its development, Behavior was facing severe time and resource restrictions because they were simultaneously working on the Freddy Krueger chapter, which was scheduled to be released just a month later. So they had to cut a huge chunk of content initially planned for the Leatherface DLC, including Kate Denson, who was supposed to be the survivor associated with Bubba, and what's even more disappointing, almost all of Bubba's unique add-ons. As a result, at the release, out of his 19 add-ons, 17 were shamelessly copy-pasted from the Hillbilly set. Some of them had different names and icons, like for example knife scratches, the beast marks, and the grease, but their properties were still absolutely identical to what they did for the Hillbilly. The 2 remaining add-ons, namely Chili and award-winning Chili, were actually unique. The both of them increased acceleration during the chainsaw sweep, which I admit sounds interesting, because the faster you reach your top speed, the faster you catch up with survivors and down them. But in reality, these add-ons turned out to be a huge giant L, because there's practically no difference between the lowest and the highest speed of the chainsaw sweep. So even if you could stack both of the Chili add-ons for some super fast acceleration, you still wouldn't get anything, because there's nothing to accelerate. Come on, 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 come on. Oh my god, are you kidding me? Bro, this purple add-on is trash. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't accelerate you. And it becomes even funnier when you realize that the only reason Behavior introduced these add-ons was because they needed at least something to replace Hillbilly's Spike Boots and Thompson's Moonshine with. Both of these add-ons improved the chainsaw steering, and this, as you understand, wouldn't translate well to Bubba's power, because unlike the Hillbilly's chainsaw, Bubba's chainsaw doesn't restrict steering in any way. And that's what Bubba was like at the release. Can't say that he was straight up garbage, because having insta-down in your base kit makes you a threat by default. Plus, his chainsaw allowed him to destroy pallets a little faster than most killers, but it still wasn't enough to make people play him when there was the Hillbilly, who was objectively better at everything. Everything except for one: camping. As much as camping in the DBD community is considered to be worse than plague and tuberculosis combined, let's not play dumb and pretend that none of us thought about trying to camp as Bubba when we first learned that it can one-shot several survivors with one hit. And you can't blame people for this, because deep inside everybody understands that without camping you would have to spend ages trying to induce a scenario where you would have a group of survivors sitting close to each other somewhere in the open waiting to get wrecked by your chainsaw. Whereas when you're chilling next to a hooked survivor, you know for a fact that sooner or later one of their teammates is gonna show up and attempt to rescue them, and that's when you strike. To this very day, Bubba remains one of the strongest campers in the game, but back then it was a whole different level of disgusting. First of all, since there was no tantrum meter, Bubba could spend both hook stages standing in front of you with his chainsaw up, and even with the best anti-camping perks, your teammates physically wouldn't be able to do anything about it, because the moment they got within the chainsaw sweep distance, they were doomed. And second, while revving the chainsaw, chainsaw, you didn't have to worry that it would activate by accident because you weren't careful enough and filled the revving bar too early. Because with the old Bubba, on top of that, you actually had to manually activate your power by letting go of your AM2. So just imagine how easy it was to control survivors on hooks. How do you like read me so perfectly? What is... Oh my god, you were on the other side. Bro! I swear, man, I literally forgot that I need to let go. I was like, why is it not working? Going versus blatant Bubba campers felt miserable, but at least they were not that hard to counter. The moment you saw the first survivor go down and get hooked, all you had to do was check the hook once. And if you saw a nodding Bubba nearby, you just went back, finished the remaining gens, and escaped without looking back. However, things became way more complicated when Bubba players learned about Insidious. This wonderful perk removes the killer's terror radius when they stand still, and provided that they're also hiding behind something, it makes it completely impossible to detect their presence. And that was exactly what Bubba mains needed, because this way they gave survivors coming for the rescue a false feeling of safety, therefore luring them closer. And as soon as they started unhooking their teammate, our happy camper appeared from behind the nearest pile of garbage with his chainsaw at the ready. This strat was especially effective in the basement, where there's only one way out, and if you got ambushed by an insidious Bubba down there, it was an instant game over. And you would think that after seeing what kind of monster behavior had spawned, they would act quickly and at least attempt to contain it in some way. But it's the old behavior we're talking about here, so they actually needed 4 years to come up with a new vision for Bubba. And before that, there were only 2 minor updates that in my opinion qualify as bug fixes at best. The first one made Bloodlust no longer affect Bubba's revving speed, which I personally didn't even know was a thing in the first place. And the second made the cooldown for successful chainsaw attacks the same as for missed attacks, which is 2 seconds. The time for big changes came in the summer of 2020 in patch 4.1.0, when behavior finally decided to revisit Bubba and fill in the gaps they left at the release. First thing they did in this update is give Bubba's power charges. 1 charge equaled 3 chainsaw swings, and with 3 charges you had by default, it meant that you could get the maximum of 9 swings, and that's a pretty huge upgrade compared to 5 that we had before. Next, the devs increased Bubba's speed during the chainsaw sweep from 5.06 meters per second to 529, and combined with the previous buff, it made his power feel a ton better during chases. A little more. Yeah, that's about right. And let me just get outside so that I don't stand in the way and go. Okay. Perfect. Alright. Alright. Oh my god. That's like... Bro, that's like 1 extra charge and that's like the distance of like 4 shacks? To prevent you from mindlessly spamming chainsaw sweeps, they also introduced a punishment which increases the cooldown of missed chainsaw attacks for each charge you used before that. And thank god they figured not to do the same for successful attacks. So even if you bumped into a wall after using all of the charges but you still downed someone just a moment before, your cooldown would actually remain unchanged. It was a massive improvement compared to how cooldowns used to work originally, because now the game punished you only for missed attacks, which is how it was supposed to be since day one in my opinion. But most importantly, in this patch, behavior made the first very humble step towards nerfing Bubba's camping potential. They added the tantrum meter, which begins to gradually build up as soon as you press M2 to charge your chainsaw. Should you decide to keep revving it for too long without initiating a chainsaw sweep, it will make you stop in place and swing the chainsaw as if you just bumped into something. This made it impossible to keep your chainsaw active non-stop while camping, and gave survivors a little window to unhook their teammates. To give Bubba mains even less incentive to keep revving the chainsaw for too long, this update also made it so that there's no longer secondary action requirement to initiate a sweep, meaning that it will happen automatically as soon as the revving bar is full. And that's funny, because in these patch notes, this specific change is marked as a buff, whereas to me it's clear that it was in fact a nerf implemented to make camping as Bubba harder. And last but not least, patch 4.1.0 finally reworked Bubba's add-ons so that he no longer shared them with the Hillbilly. Or should I say that they reworked only several of them while treacherously stealing the rest from the Hillbilly. Of course, it doesn't mean that from now on the Hillbilly didn't have any add-ons, because behavior actually provided him with the brand new add-on set. But they were so bad compared to what he had before that combined with an insane nerf to his base kit, it instantly made him lose his status as the second best killer in the game and basically turned him into what one day Bubba used to be for him. Such drastic changes caused the community to rebel. People were absolutely infuriated by the fact that the changes to Bubba Bubba, as good as they came, were basically done at the expense of another much-loved character. At that time, barely anyone understood the logic behind this decision. But today, years later, after everyone grew accustomed with this new state of things, I'm here to break it down for you. The thing is that Behavior never truly cared about the Hillbilly. In fact, he most likely wouldn't even be in the game if they had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre license from day one. But since they didn't, they had to pretty much create a Leatherface knockoff with the same weapons, same messed up face, and even a somewhat similar backstory. And then when the devs finally got their hands on the Leatherface license, they simply didn't need the Hillbilly anymore. And that's why it was Bubba who received all the original Chainsaw add-ons in patch 4.1.0 and not the other way around, because he was always meant to have them in the first place. The other reason why they eventually made Bubba stronger than the Hillbilly is a little more pragmatic. You see, being a licensed character, Bubba costs Behavior a shitload of money every year, and that means that his chapter needs to sell more to cover these expenses. But with the old Hillbilly being not only a much better Chainsaw character, but also a free character, it was very hard to convince people that they needed to buy the Leatherface chapter. So they simply pulled the Hillbilly out of the race, therefore making his paid counterpart look way more appealing. Patch 5.5.0 is the last Bubba-related patch so far. It didn't really change anything about his power, but rather removed his unlockable masks from 4 original survivors that before this update could be claimed by sacrificing them 25 times each. The reason Behavior decided to do it is to put an end to the wave of racism the community was dealing with at that time, because it turned out that some people thought it was actually funny to stream snipe black content creators and face cam them as Bubba with Claudette's mask on. Think of it as the DVD version of blackfacing. And while I 100% agree that something had to be done about this situation, I still think that removing the masks was a big mistake. First of all, because it didn't even solve the problem. The people who used Claudette's mask to harass black streamers were not banned, at least to my recollection. And a lot of them are most likely still playing the game, it's just they're not using the mask. And second, because by taking away such a cool and lore-accurate gimmick from Bubba over a bunch of attention-hungry morons, you effectively gave them what they wanted, and show that your own community control you into doing literally anything, even if it's the removal of the accessories associated with black characters.